Chapter 848. Inside Salamandra, the black-clothed men who had infiltrated Salamandra were quietly moving towards their designated location. Because a large number of people had been sent out to repair Raging Flame Capital, and because the explosion had attracted the attention of Salamandra, more people had been sent out. Coupled with the fact that the black-clothed men were moving towards an extremely remote area, the black-clothed men did not encounter many people along the way. And even if they did encounter people, with the black-clothed men's special gift of stealth, basically no one would be able to discover them. Salamandra's headquarters was a large palace made up of 12 palaces. When the black-clothed men sneaked into the 5th palace, they all stopped. Then, after some planning, they went deeper into the 5th palace. They went deeper and deeper, and finally arrived at a blind spot where there was a bronze statue. "We're here, right?" Among them, the black-clothed man who seemed to be the leader looked at the bronze statue in front of him and quietly asked. If Wu Ming was here, he would definitely be able to recognize the owner of this voice. It was Galji, who he had ruthlessly peeled off a layer of skin during the day. At the same time, Wu Ming would probably be able to guess what Galji and the others wanted to do. Break the seal of absolute evil. Most likely, this was the entrance to the seal. However, it was clear that the key items to break the seal could not be gathered. So how could they break the seal? The flag of the alliance leader who defeated absolute evil returned to no name, and Galji also returned the sovereignty of the Ophiuchus constellation and the Leo constellation to Wu Ming. Even if they could obtain the horn of the starry sea dragon king, there was no way to break the seal. After all, the items to break the seal were indispensable. However, since they came, they must have the confidence to break the seal. "It's right here, Your Highness," Belle said from the side. Then, Galji looked at the other black-clothed man. "Elder Gu, please move this bronze statue away." However, the only person who could be called Elder Gu by Galji was the griffin with the genome tree engraved on its body. Although it was inconceivable, the black-clothed man who Galji spoke to was indeed the griffin from before. Why would it appear here in human form? It was probably a special gift item. "Yes," Elder Gu answered simply. Then, he walked to the front of the bronze statue. The others also made way for Elder Gu to perform. "Ling, how are the preparations going?" It seemed that was what Galji was relying on to break the seal of absolute evil. "Everything is ready," Ling said as she took out a gift card from her backpack. Then, Ling started crying to Galji. "However, Your Highness, that inside is seriously corroding my gift card. I'm afraid it won't be long before my gift card becomes useless." If White Yaksha heard these words, he would definitely be shocked. The gift card's full name was Laplace paper. It wasn't something that could be casually destroyed. However, the thing inside Belle's gift card was actually able to corrode the gift card. What was inside the gift card? Moreover, generally speaking, the gift card could disappear like a servant's spiritual form. It could be taken out at any time without worrying about losing it. However, it seemed that Ling's gift card couldn't do that at all because of the thing inside it. "Is it that serious?" Galji was surprised. "You should know that we've offered ourselves as gift cards." The last black-clothed man, Aurora, who wanted to attack No Name, sighed helplessly. For the sake of that, basically everyone except His Highness had taken out their gift cards and used them as containers to move that. First, they put that into a gift card, then used another gift card to store that. After that, they used another gift card to store the gift card. Simply put, it was a nesting doll. However, even so, the speed at which that eroded the gift card was beyond everyone's imagination. Naturally, the changes in the gift card could be perceived by its owner. Along the way, Maxwell's gift card was broken, followed by Aurora and Elder GE's gift card. In the end, only Ling's gift card could barely be used. His Highness gift card collected the things in other gift cards. After all, the gift card was very rare. Even Galji and the others used it to store their personal belongings. After contributing their gift cards, their belongings naturally had to be handed over to Galji to help store. But this also means that does indeed have an ability beyond our imagination. Galji was not worried but happy. Although that was the case, Ling's gift card was indeed reaching its limit. In the end, if only that bastard Maxwell could give us Pandora's box. Ling complained. Pandora's box was highly resistant to that. Or, it could be said that as a box that contained all calamities, Pandora's box had the ability to contain all calamities. It could be said that there was no calamity item that Pandora's box couldn't contain. After all, that was the very thing that Pandora's box transported to the lower levels. Although that's the case, Pandora's box is already full of holes. If it continues to be used, I'm afraid it will be destroyed. Galgi had seen what Pandora's box looked like after that was taken out. He didn't dare to imagine that could corrode Pandora's box to such an extent. And Pandora's box still needs to be used to recover that. It can't be completely corroded. After all, this was an item that the higher-ups lent to them and had to be returned to them in the end. Moreover, Maxwell had contributed his own gift card, so no one gossiped. It's clearly something that won't be used for long. It's obvious that the higher-ups are deliberately causing trouble for us, Ling complained rather angrily. The reason for causing trouble was naturally obvious. After all, they lost the item that the higher-ups gave them to unlock absolute evil. It's all that bastard's fault. If he didn't steal our item, we wouldn't have to work so hard. Ling was furious when she thought of that person. Of course, she was talking about Wu Ming. He captured her and Aurora to blackmail Galgi into exchanging the item that belonged to No Name. In the end, he took away everything that they needed for their next plan. He was simply a robber. It was precisely because of this that they had no choice but to use that to unlock the seal of absolute evil. Since it's already like this, let's not talk about him anymore. Galgi naturally didn't have a good impression of Wu Ming, but what Ling didn't know was that what Wu Ming said to Galgi before she fainted still had some effect on Galgi. And since we're already here, we can just release that later. Elder Gu advised in a calm voice. This was the only consolation that everyone had. Get ready. I'm going to push it away. As Elder Gu spoke, he exerted force with one hand. The bronze statue that Elder Gu was holding with both hands was pushed away without any movement, or it was lifted and moved away. As a griffin, even if Elder Gu used a special gift to temporarily transform into a human form, he was still a griffin. Naturally, he was extremely powerful. After the bronze statue was pushed away, what was revealed was a spiral staircase that led underground. Elder Gu, I'll have to trouble you and Aurora to bring up the rear. Ling, let's go in. Yes, Your Highness. Elder Gu and Aurora nodded in agreement. Then, Galgi and Ling stepped into the spiral staircase. Aurora and Elder Gu seemed to have a tacit understanding. Aurora quietly retreated into the darkness to investigate the surrounding situation, while Elder Gu gently placed the bronze statue back to its original position. Then, Elder Gu also disappeared into the darkness as if no one had ever been here. Chapter 849. Outside of the capital of Blazing Flames, Wu Ming carried Vera out of the portal and flew in a random direction. One had to know that most of the land in the North District was barren land, and so was the outer sect of the 54545 division. Therefore, there was no need to deliberately find a barren land to fight Maxwell, because places that were not cities were basically barren. My bride. Let go of my bride. The voice was heard before the person could be seen. There were some ripples in the space. In the midst of the distortion, Maxwell appeared at the place where Wu Ming had appeared before. Looking at Wu Ming's departing figure, Maxwell's figure flashed, and along with the distortion of space, Maxwell disappeared again. On Wu Ming's side, seeing that it was about time, he stopped. This place was far enough from the capital of Blazing Flames, and the surrounding land was barren. After landing on the ground, Wu Ming let go of Vera, who was blushing in his arms. Vera, can you leave for a while? Wu Ming said gently to Vera. Vera tilted her head in confusion at first, then nodded silently. She turned around and waved her hand, opening a door, the realm door. Villo, be careful. After showing concern for Wu Ming, Vera jumped into the realm door with a blushing face and left this place. This period of time together has been an unexpected gain. Wu Ming smiled and shrugged. Yes, that's right. Wu Ming was referring to pure friendship. However, without waiting for Wu Ming to think more, the space not far from Wu Ming distorted, and Maxwell appeared in front of Wu Ming. Maxwell, who appeared in front of Wu Ming, did not attack, but looked around for Vera's figure. In the end, Maxwell looked at Wu Ming with an extremely gloomy expression. Where's my bride? Wu Ming smiled slightly. Of course, she was sent to my bridal chamber. This sentence was like a fuse, causing Maxwell's eyes to suddenly bulge out, and his mental state became even more abnormal. This moment, it was as if the pain that Maxwell had suffered from Wu Ming's attack had manifested. Maxwell howled at the top of his lungs. Kill you! 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 The ice and fire instantly arrived in front of Wu Ming. They were like hunting dogs, frantically biting at Wu Ming. However, haven't you learned your lesson? Maxwell, didn't I tell you? Wu Ming raised a hand as he spoke. In an instant, a large amount of mana surged and burst out from Wu Ming's palm, blasting the man-eating hound into pieces. This kind of attack is completely useless? In the face of Maxwell's attack, Wu Ming only needed to compress his own mana and release it to break it. Yes, it was a simple release of magic power. In order to prevent the blood of the Absolute Evil clones from producing new Absolute Evil clones, Wu Ming had been using the Lune Rune that could completely destroy the Absolute Evil clones. Maxwell, who understood what the Lune Rune was, could not help but frown. He was so angry that he was about to lose his mind, but he did not completely lose his mind. He still understood what was futile. Not only that, but Wu Ming also had the powerful power of chanting and the Manchala square that stored many divine persona equipment. No matter how many Absolute Evil clones there were, they would not be able to do anything to him in a short time. Moreover, Vera might have already escaped. This guy is just trying to piss me off. At that moment, Maxwell had such a thought. To put it bluntly, Maxwell wanted to escape. Wu Ming naturally would not let Maxwell escape. I still say the same thing. As a 4-digit demon king, you are too cheap. You are not worthy of Vera at all. One of Wu Ming's taunts made Maxwell angry again. Shut up. Vera is mine. Mine. Wu Ming could not help but laugh. As expected, Maxwell would lose his mind when it came to Vera. Wu Ming's previous taunts were all to make Maxwell gradually lose his mind and lower his IQ. After all, an opponent without reason would not escape. Moreover, an opponent without reason would not hold back their strength and would reveal their hidden killer moves. For example, standing in the middle of the Absolute Evil clones' army and being able to command the Absolute Evil clones. Wu Ming had more or less understood Maxwell's situation. Next, it was time to use the real deal. If Maxwell reacted and allowed any of the Absolute Evil clones to escape to the capital of Raging Flames, it would be a big problem. Moreover, with so many Absolute Evil clones, they should be all of Maxwell's assets. It was just nice to get rid of them all in one go. At that moment, Wu Ming snapped his fingers. Pa! Chapter 850. Along with the almost inaudible vibrations, the entire space seemed to have changed. Maxwell felt a chill run down his spine, as if he had encountered an unprecedented crisis. What did you do? Unlike the previous angry roars, this time Maxwell questioned Wu Ming with a slightly frightened tone. Of course I'm playing the game of blessings. Wu Ming lowered his raised hand and answered in a rather pleased tone. Immediately after, Wu Ming's devilish smile was reflected in Maxwell's eyes, causing the temperature on Maxwell's back to drop by quite a bit. Do you have the authority of the organizer? It was understandable that Maxwell was shocked. Not everyone could obtain the authority of the organizer, not to mention Wu Ming, who had just joined the box court not long ago. Although Maxwell was a 4-digit demon king, he didn't have the authority of the organizer. There was no other reason. Although Maxwell had been in the box court longer than Wu Ming, he and Wu Ming were both considered newbies. However, this once again proved how cheap Maxwell, the 4-digit demon king, was. Wu Ming was different from Maxwell. As the root dragon, the box court naturally wouldn't be stingy with granting Wu Ming the authority of the organizer. This was an intangible benefit. It seems like you don't know that I have the authority of the organizer. But soon after, Wu Ming felt relieved. Ever since he used the authority of the organizer on Wu Ming, he didn't use it again. After all, Wu Ming didn't need the authority of the organizer. Over time, the authority of the organizer was basically forgotten by Wu Ming. While Wu Ming was still thinking about how to deal with Maxwell, he slowly thought of using the authority of the organizer to deal with Maxwell. In the box court world, the box court system was absolute. Even the humans in the final trial had to abide by the rules of the box court. If he had to find someone who wasn't restricted by the box court, it would definitely be Wu Ming. Of course he had to be in his true body. Thank you for sending me these bodies of absolute evil. Judging from the number, this should be all of them. Not only will I be able to eliminate them all in one go, but I can also bury them with you. This is killing two birds with one stone. Smack! Wu Ming raised his hand and snapped his fingers again. A white contract document floated down from the sky and landed in front of Maxwell. Maxwell subconsciously caught it and began to read it. Gift game name, challenge game contestant. Maxwell contestants winning condition. Defeat the organizer at the designated venue. Host's victory condition. The contestant cannot defeat the host within the specified time limit. Participant penalty for failure. Death oath. Respecting the above content, based on the glory, flag, and authority of the organizer, this game of blessings will be held. Seal of Originate God. This was an extremely simple bestowment competition. All one needed to do was defeat the organizer. It was as simple and crude as those demon kings who abused the organizer's authority to attack ordinary citizens. But today, the victim was a demon king with a 4-digit number. Rip, angrily tearing the contract to shreds, Maxwell went completely mad. Ah! Hearing this heart-wrenching cry, people who didn't know would think that Maxwell had suffered a great grievance. What is it? Lord Demon King, you don't even have the courage to participate in the bestowment competition? As long as you defeat me, you can win. Wu Ming continued to mock Maxwell in a mocking tone, even though he was forced to participate in the gift match. However, defeating Wu Ming was extremely difficult. The Manchala phalanx that contained thousands of divine weapons, the divine blade of salvation, the evolved divine power obtained from killing a god, the rune script that the god Odin sacrificed one of his eyes, the martial arts that originated from the Shadow Queen Skaha, the game system magic that came from an unknown world, and the spiritual base that reached the peak of the servant. In terms of weapons, Maxwell was not as good as Wu Ming. In terms of magic, Maxwell was not as good as Wu Ming. In terms of close combat, Maxwell was not as good as Wu Ming. In terms of home field advantage, Maxwell was not as good as Wu Ming. Maxwell's bestowment could not cause any damage to Wu Ming. The only cheat-like immortality and miraculous space jump also lost its effect after Maxwell was pulled into the game of blessings by Wu Ming. Although Maxwell didn't have a comprehensive understanding of Silent Wonder, he knew one thing. In a head-on battle, he absolutely couldn't win against Silent Wonder. In short, Maxwell could only die now. You want me to die? It's not that easy. Maxwell suddenly raised his head. His eyes were slightly protruding and bloodshot. Maxwell waved his hand, and the army of absolute evil avatars ran toward the direction of Blazing Flame City. You're right. Someone needs to be buried with me. People who were close to death tended to become more clear-headed. It seemed that Maxwell was like that. He actually thought of letting the army of absolute evil avatars attack Blazing Flame City. If so many absolute evil avatars attacked Blazing Flame City, Wu Ming was sure that Blazing Flame City would be destroyed. This was what Wu Ming was worried about before. But, do you think I didn't think of this, Maxwell? Wu Ming crossed his arms and smiled. Other than that, he did nothing else. When the absolute evil avatars rushed to a certain place, it was as if there was an invisible wall blocking their way. The absolute evil avatars collectively stopped. Bam 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 bam. However, there were still many two-headed dragons who crashed into the wall and let out miserable shrieks. Roar roar roar. Along with the collision of the two-headed dragons, the entire space changed. Like raindrops falling into the water, the entire space of the barren land where Wu Ming, Maxwell, and the two-headed dragon army were changed completely amidst the ripples. This wasn't the barren land outside Blazing Flame City. This was clearly an endless ice field filled with icicles. The invisible wall that blocked the absolute evil avatars was a layer of ice that was more than 10 meters thick. Phew! A gust of cold wind blew and Maxwell couldn't help but shrink his body. Now, he understood why he felt a chill down his spine. It wasn't because he was overly afraid. Instead, it was because the environment around him had been changed. The contract clearly states that you have to defeat the organizer at the stipulated venue. You've already arrived at the so-called stipulated venue, Wu Ming said, and a contract appeared before him. The previous contract had been torn apart by Maxwell, but that didn't affect the contents of the contract at all. Then, Wu Ming tossed the contract aside and picked up the staff of Anziergen that had appeared beside him out of nowhere. Everything just now was an illusion created by the Loon Rune. You've already arrived at this tomb long before I issued the contract. This was the fixed enchantment of the Staff of Anzi-Ergen, the 5th layer of Icefield and Nazalic. The Staff of Anzi-Ergen was retrieved by Wooming from his Dragoness space after the Loon Rune's illusion was activated. The Loon Rune was inscribed on the ground by Wooming's mental strength, which was why Maxwell didn't see it. All right, Maxwell. Are you ready to meet your death? Chapter 851. Salamandra's headquarters, the 5th palace of the 12 palaces, the underground passage that Galji and Ling entered. The staircase leading underground extended in a spiral pattern. Because of the surrounding darkness, Galji took out the illumination gift from his gift card and walked up the stairs with Ling. After walking for a long time, the two still didn't see the bottom. We're not there yet, Your Highness. Ling held her gift card that was starting to heat up and said worriedly. Can't hold on any longer? Galji stopped and turned to look at the gift card in Ling's hand. Ling's gift card was no longer the same color as before. The entire card was red and there was a faint trace of heat. If you can't hold on any longer, then use my gift card to replace it. Although Galji's gift card contained other people's items, if he really couldn't hold on any longer, he had to use it when necessary. After all, he couldn't let that come out here. Regardless of the losses, if that really came out, he and Ling would be in great danger. It's okay, Your Highness. My gift card can still hold on for a while. Let's go quickly. Ling wiped the sweat from her forehead and smiled to show that she was fine. At that moment, Galji didn't say anything more. Right now, they had to reach the bottom quickly. After walking for a while, Galji and Ling finally saw the bottom. It was an underground space. On one of the walls in the underground space, the words "Between the Stars" were engraved. Not only that, but there were also 5 sealed doors and a piece of parchment on the wall engraved with the words. As mentioned before, even humans in the final trial had to follow the rules of the box court. After Absolute Evil was sealed, it naturally left behind a contract document. Of course, this parchment was the contract document that sealed Absolute Evil, and these 5 doors were probably the entrance to unlock Absolute Evil's seal. However, the correct entrance could only be one of them. However, Galji and Ling had no intention of solving this gift game at all. They even stood motionless in the same place. If we had the item to unlock the seal, I'm afraid we would have to unravel the mystery of this game to unlock the seal. Galji couldn't help but sigh. However, with Belle around, the mystery of the Game of Blessings will naturally be solved easily. Belle, who was standing behind Galji, smiled proudly. It seemed that the young girl had unparalleled confidence in her wisdom. But shortly after, her expression changed. Your Highness, my gift card can't hold on much longer. Ling's expression changed as she said to Galji with a sad face. Galji looked at Belle's gift card. The gift card, which was originally red from the heat, had now turned black. It was an ominous shade of black. Ling, place your gift card in front of the 5 doors. Be quick, Galji ordered. Belle's gift card and the others' gift cards were all broken, so it wasn't wise to release that one here. Now, he could only throw caution to the wind and place Belle's gift card together with the thing inside it. When the thing corrodes Belle's gift card, it will automatically come out. Quick, Ling, put it down and we'll leave as soon as possible. If they stayed any longer, they would probably be buried with the seal of Absolute Evil. Yes. Ling immediately used her gift of distance control and the gift card in her hand appeared in front of the 5 doors. Let's go. After Galji finished speaking, Ling immediately came to Galji's side and grabbed his arm. Ling's gift was activated again and the two instantly disappeared on the spot and returned to the first step of the spiral staircase. The reason why they didn't use the gift card to go to the bottom was that Ling didn't know how deep the spiral staircase was and couldn't accurately control the distance. Now that they had walked through it once, Ling had an idea of the distance from the bottom to the top. Hence, Ling brought Galji to the first step. Dong dong. Galji immediately knocked on the bronze statue blocking the entrance. This was his and Elder Ge's secret signal. A few seconds later, the bronze statue was moved away and Galji and Ling immediately came out. After Galji and Belle came out, Gulao immediately put the bronze statue back in place. Your Highness, how is it? Aurora, who came with Elder Gu, immediately asked. It's ready. Let's leave quickly, Galji said without hesitation. Elder Gu and Aurora nodded. Then, the four of them immediately followed the original path and left Salamandra. At the gate of Salamandra, the member of Salamandra who went to report had already returned to his post. They actually said to let them do whatever they want. Even if we are allies with no name, they can't just do whatever they want. Although he complained like this, he knew that even though Wu Ming's community was a nameless no name, he wasn't some insignificant character. Whether they were afraid of the other party, or they were allies, in short, Mandela's order was to wait and see. Anyway, this guard was not the leader of Salamandra, so he didn't have to worry about it. He just had to listen to the orders from above and watch his own gate. But right after that, he heard soft footsteps coming from behind him. He immediately turned around, but what greeted him was a fist that was not the size of a normal person. Who? Before he could shout, he was immediately knocked out by the fist. The one who knocked him out was naturally Elder Gu in his human form. It's time to go, Elder Gu, Galji said behind Elder Ge's back. There was no telling when that would come out, so it was better to leave quickly. Elder Gu naturally understood this point, so he didn't kill him. He only knocked out the member of Salamandra who was guarding the door. The soft footsteps were caused by them walking too quickly. But since they were already at the gate, there was no need to hide it. Your Highness, do we still need to wait for Maxwell? Aurora suddenly asked. In my opinion, that guy probably ran away a long time ago. How could he beat that bastard? Ling pouted. They naturally knew that Maxwell went to find Wu Ming. With Maxwell leading Wu Ming, they were happy to see this, so they let Maxwell do whatever he wanted. And Ling and the others, who had seen how powerful Wu Ming was, naturally knew that Maxwell could not beat Wu Ming. That was why Ling said that Maxwell ran away a long time ago. As for being killed or captured by Wu Ming, it was not realistic. After all, Maxwell's immortality and escapability were top-notch. That's true, Your Highness. We should hurry and retreat, Elder Gu also advised. At that moment, Galji nodded and the four of them prepared to leave. But I really didn't expect you to have such high expectations for Maxwell. Chapter 852. Wu Ming's voice came from the shadows of the street in front of them, which made the four of them immediately alert. Then, Wu Ming's figure walked out of the shadows of the night, and Wu Ming appeared in front of the four of them. You still found us in the end. Galji closed his eyes slightly. Wu Ming being able to defeat Maxwell and find them in time was also within Galji's expectations, but the probability was very small. It's all thanks to Maxwell. Wu Ming smiled. If it weren't for Maxwell, he really wouldn't have known that Galji and the others would sneak into Salamandra tonight. However, Galji didn't understand Wu Ming's words. Although they weren't in the same group, Maxwell shouldn't have deliberately exposed their location. After all, this was related to the plan of the higher-ups. However, there was another possibility. For example, Maxwell had been captured by Wu Ming. Where's Maxwell? Galji asked Wu Ming. Wu Ming answered Galji straightforwardly. I caught him. Wu Ming's eyes weren't perfunctory at all, as if he was telling the truth. Seeing that Wu Ming didn't seem to be lying, Belle, Golao, and Aurora were shocked. They knew best how difficult it was to deal with Maxwell. He was born between life and death, and the strongest demon in the North District had been entangled by Maxwell for 100 years. However, Wu Ming, who had only met Maxwell a few times, had actually captured him. How could they not be shocked? However, this gave them a signal. Wu Ming's strength was probably beyond their imagination. At that moment, the three of them immediately became vigilant. Go Lao's black cloak bulged slightly, as if he was about to remove his human form and turn back into a griffin. A bulge also appeared under Aurora's black cloak, which looked like a weapon. Belle grabbed Galji's hand, ready to use the gift of distance control to take him away if something went wrong. On the other hand, Galji didn't panic at all. He didn't look like someone who had been forced into a corner by Wu Ming. Anyway, we're not in cahoots with him. You've helped me by capturing him. I have no intention of helping you. Wu Ming then looked at Galji. Instead, it's you guys who sneaked into Salamandra. What are you up to? I should have told you to stop messing around with the people around me, right? The people around Wu Ming didn't just refer to no name. It could be understood that the people around Wu Ming were also included in the category of people around him. To put it simply, Wu Ming didn't want to see Galji again, at least not in this way. Galji didn't say anything and just watched Wu Ming quietly. However, Belle, Elder Gu, and Aurora, who had a tacit understanding with Galji, were ready to attack. Wu Ming didn't want to waste any more time with Galji's group and took the lead. Wu Ming didn't move at all. Instead, he relied on his mental strength to transport a large amount of Lune runes from the ground to Galji's group.
There's something below.
Aurora, who was a mage, was the first to discover the Lune runes underground. She yelled and immediately flew up with magic. At this moment, the explosive Lune runes underground were activated. Boom! Smoke and dust filled the entrance of Salamandra, concealing Galji's group of 4. However, this didn't affect Wu Ming, who possessed mental strength at all.
He easily saw Elder Gu, who had transformed into a griffin, charging toward him.
Suddenly, rows of translucent squares appeared behind Wu Ming. Mjolnir, Mjolnir! Wu Ming yelled and a short-handled hammer emerged from one of the squares. Wu Ming grasped it in his hand.
Then, Wu Ming swung the short hammer heavily at Glea, who had transformed into a griffin and was charging over.
In an instant, lightning erupted from the hammer like a wave, and countless thunderbolts engulfed Glea and drowned him. Glea hurriedly retreated from the range of the thunderbolts.
However, his body was full of scorch marks and traces of thunderbolts that hadn't dissipated.
Ugh! This caused Glea to whimper in pain, because the lightning was still taking effect in Glea's body. Clang, clang. Along with the sound of a harp, the thunderbolts in Glea's body gradually disappeared. Wu Ming turned to the source of the sound. It turned out that it was the harp that Aurora had retrieved from under the black cloak and played. Needless to say, the harp must be a special gift to be able to eliminate the thunderbolts of Thor's hammer. Mjolnir, also known as Thor's hammer, was a weapon used by Thor, the thunder god of Northern European mythology. It was said to be made of rare metals from Northern Europe and the wood of the world tree. It could be said to be the strongest weapon in Northern European mythology. The fact that Glea could withstand the thunderbolts of Thor's hammer was enough to prove that he wasn't weak. So, can you still withstand the next attack? Wu Ming yelled and threw Mjolnir back into the square behind him. Shortly after, one of the squares in the Manchala square behind Wu Ming moved again. A spear, or rather, a throwing spear, fell into Wu Ming's palm. Gungnir! Wu Ming aimed the spear at Glea and threw it. What's that name? Galji instantly guessed what the spear that Wu Ming threw was. That's right, the legendary weapon held by the Norse god Odin. It was also known as the Gungnir of the god's declaration. However, what was important wasn't who held it, but the ability of Gungnir. Gungnir didn't have any fancy attributes. It only had one characteristic, which was that it would never miss. It was extremely simple and powerful.
Old Glea?
Belle yelled at Glea hurriedly.
I got it,
Glea said, flapping his griffin wings, and hurriedly flying in another direction. However, Glea also knew that Odin's Gungnir was a divine spear that would never miss. It was impossible to dodge and would definitely hit the enemy's weapon. Therefore, no matter how Glea dodged, it would be useless unless he was hit or blocked. However, they didn't have any defensive gifts. Wu Ming had also extorted the Leo's sovereignty of the sun from Galji. But Glea, who knew this, still chose to dodge. Gungnir, who had been thrown out by Wu Ming, followed closely behind Glea, and its speed became faster and faster. In the end, Glea actually saw the opportunity and turned sideways, allowing Gungnir to pierce through his thigh.
Got to say, this was indeed a way to deal with the Gungnir.
Glea's thigh was only pierced, and his wings and forelimbs were fine, so it didn't affect his battle capabilities much. The Gungnir that hit Glea automatically flew back to Wu Ming's hand. Wu Ming tossed it casually into the Manchala square. I don't want to continue playing with you guys. Since the other party didn't reveal any more trump cards, there was no need to do so. Chapter 853. As Wu Ming spoke, a large number of grids appeared in the Manchala formation behind him. Countless weapons automatically appeared and aimed at Galji and the others. With that, countless high-grade armaments shot towards Galji, Belle, and Aurora like bullets from a machine gun.
Belle!
Aurora, who was flying in the air, shouted. She played her harp and opened an extremely weak barrier a few meters in front of her. Her purpose was naturally to cover Belle and take Galji away. As long as Galji and Belle left, she, who was flying in the sky, would be able to escape easily. As for Galji, he had already flown far away, so everyone would be able to escape successfully. I got it. Belle nodded fiercely and immediately activated her ability. However, she and Galji remained where they were. What's going on? Belle was rather flustered and at a loss. On the other hand, Galji saw that the surrounding exploded ground was filled with Lune runes again. He didn't know if it came with the explosion runes or if it was sent by Wuming when he and Wuming were fighting just now. Anyway, it was these runes that limited Belle's range of control. Galji used all his strength to kick the ground. A large number of Lune runes lost their light. It seemed that they had been destroyed and lost their effectiveness. However, countless Lune runes appeared immediately after, like an endless supply of leaks. What? It seemed that Wuming had set up a large number of these Lune runes to trap them. As expected, someone who was able to capture Maxwell after just a few meetings, how could he not have prepared a method to counter Belle's gift? However, there was no time for Belle and Galji to panic and think because Aurora's defensive barrier was extremely weak and was instantly broken by countless God's Park weapons. This was Wuming's strength. They had finally witnessed it today. For a moment, the few of them who couldn't leave and had no defensive means were at their wits' end. Even so, Belle and Aurora instantly appeared in front of Galji and protected him behind them. You! Galji was shocked. A friend in need was a friend indeed. Under such circumstances, the fact that the two of them could still protect Galji without any hesitation meant that their relationship with Galji was no longer as simple as a master-servant relationship. Only close companions could describe the two of them as such. However, it wasn't just Belle and Aurora. Glea was the same. Glea, who had flown far away because of Gungnir's pursuit, suddenly rushed back at an extremely fast speed. Roar! Along with a dragon's roar, Glea's griffin body shone brightly. His entire body began to expand and transform. In the end, Glea turned into a giant dragon and stood in front of Galji and the others, taking on Wuming's weapon barrage. Elder Gu! As a young girl, Belle looked at Glea, who had blocked the damage for them with heartache. Glea was the one who had blocked the Lune rune explosion for them. Then, Belle calmed down and looked at Galji. Your Highness, what should we do now? Glea used his life to create an opportunity for them, so Galji had to give instructions on what to do. No matter if it was to attack or retreat, Galji had to make the decision. They were blocked by Wuming as soon as they stepped out of Salamandra. Belle's gift wasn't effective at the moment, Aurora wasn't of much use, and they couldn't defeat Galji in a head-on battle. Glea was also enduring the pain of taking on the weapon barrage for the three of them. Given the current situation, it seemed like retreating to the base of Salamandra, for the time being, was the wisest choice. However, such a huge commotion at the entrance of Salamandra naturally attracted the attention of the insiders. As a mage, Aurora could clearly sense that there were already many people rushing over here. Besides, if they hid inside Salamandra, they would eventually be discovered, especially when Wuming was still here. Besides, they couldn't give up on Glea. Get ready, I'm going to forcibly release another cosmology. Galji's eyes suddenly became cold. The so-called another cosmology was another universe, and it was also a powerful force that Wuming didn't know about in the box garden world. It could be understood as a gift that could infinitely magnify one's own universe to interfere with the outside world. This explanation seemed similar to the inherent enchantment that materialized the mind of a magician, but at the end of the day, another cosmology was many times more powerful than the inherent enchantment. This was because the simulation of another cosmology was infinitely magnifying the cosmology one belonged to. This was not something that a mere magician's spiritual landscape could compare to. Moreover, the holder of another cosmology was basically the center of every group of gods, or rather, those who possessed another cosmology often had the ability to become the center of a group of gods. Therefore, it was not an exaggeration to say that another cosmology was one of the most powerful forces in the box garden world. But, Your Highness, Ling couldn't help but worry. As one of the strongest forces in the box garden, each another cosmology had its own restrictions and conditions. In order to use another cosmology, the restrictions had to be lifted or the conditions had to be met. And Galji's another cosmology required him to hold the sovereignty of the sun in order to activate it. If it was forcibly activated, failure was considered good, but serious injury or even death was very likely. However, their only two sovereignty of the sun, Leo's and Ophiuchus's, had been threatened by Wu Ming. In the current situation, it was extremely difficult for Galji to activate another cosmology. However, looking at Glea, who was unconscious and was only instinctively protecting them, Galji couldn't help but clench his fists. Since they had been forced to this extent, Galji would feel bad if he didn't teach Wu Ming a lesson. His another cosmology was a powerful trump card that could even kill the Demon King in one blow. Even Maxwell, who had an extremely powerful immortality, was no exception. Wu Ming was just a mere spirit. No matter how strong he was, it was impossible for him to withstand the damage caused by the another cosmology if he was caught off guard. If he was successfully launched and hit, he would die without a doubt. It could be regarded as relieving his worries. Anyway, that had been placed at the entrance of the seal of absolute evil. As long as the time was up, that would erode the seal of absolute evil, and absolute evil would break out of the seal. First, they had to get through the difficulties in front of them. Then, they could fish in troubled waters and escape from here. As for using the Pandora's box that Maxwell carried to retrieve that? What a joke. Galji and the others were preparing to take advantage of the chaos after unlocking the seal of absolute evil to eliminate Maxwell, who was sent to monitor them, and escape from the control of the higher-ups. Therefore, at present, as long as they released another cosmology, eliminated Wu Ming in one fell swoop, found Maxwell who was captured by Wu Ming, and eliminated him, they would be completely free. Do you dare to bet? Galji suddenly asked. Your Highness, no matter what, I will be by your side. Ling looked at Galji with an extremely determined gaze. Me too, Your Highness. Aurora echoed. Galji smiled. Then, Galji immediately gave orders. Aurora, when I say start later, move Gulao away. Ling, please help me block the Godhead equipment that might break through the moment Gulao is moved away. Yes, Your Highness. Ling and Aurora responded in unison. Victory or defeat depended on this. Chapter 854. Wu Ming, who was continuously attacking Galji and the others through the Manchala phalanx's weapon salvo, intentionally lowered the level of the weapon he released when he saw Glea blocking in front of Galji and the others. After all, Wu Ming didn't want to kill anyone in the first place. The weapon salvo he fired at Galji and the others was just for show. At most, it would only injure them severely, but it was impossible to kill them. But who would have thought that Glea would suddenly rush in front of Galji and the others? However, even if he intentionally lowered the level of the weapon he released, it was not something Glea's body could withstand. Just as Wu Ming was about to stop the projection of the Manchala phalanx, Glea's entire dragon body seemed to be pulled by an external force and moved away. Then, a ray of light charged at Wu Ming. Wu Ming subconsciously threw defensive weapons from the Manchala phalanx, but the ray of light instantly passed through these defensive weapons and arrived in front of Wu Ming. This is... Not only was Wu Ming surprised that the ray of light penetrated the defensive weapons, but he was also surprised by the power contained in the ray of light. It was a power he had never seen before, as if it was the power of a universe. I didn't expect Galji to have such a trump card. After Wu Ming finished speaking, his entire body was covered by the ray of light, and then he disappeared. Your Highness! We did it! Belle, who had blocked a few weapons for Galji, stood in front of Galji and looked excitedly at Wu Ming's disappearance behind the fallen shield. Is that so? Galji forced a smile and knelt on the ground with a thud. He made the right bet. Although it didn't seem to be very powerful, the simulated cosmology was successfully released. However, the price of forcibly releasing the simulated cosmology was not small. Your Highness! Belle hurriedly supported Galji with a worried expression. Quick, Belle. You and Aurora go check on old Gu first. Galji knew that he wouldn't die for a while, but Glea looked like he was about to die. Glea had already reverted from his dragon form to his griffin form. His wings and back were badly mutilated, and the griffin had fallen into a coma. Don't worry, Your Highness. I've already given Glea a simple treatment. The most important thing now is to leave this place. Aurora used magic to carry Glea and landed beside Galji. Galji nodded and stood up with Belle's help. That's good. Let's leave quickly. And at this moment, where Wu Ming had disappeared, a sacred sword filled with a powerful and ancient aura appeared. If I remember correctly, this should be a weapon called the Divine Blade of Salvation, right? Ling pondered. Then she smiled. Looks like Your Highness killed the opponent and the gift automatically drop. It seemed like an extremely unreliable way to kill monsters and steal treasures, but it was very possible in the box court world. After all, gifts were different from individuals. Some special gifts would automatically drop after the death of the original owner. It seemed like this was the case with the Divine Blade of Salvation. Your Highness, I'll go and get that sword. Ling entrusted Galji to Aurora, and ran in the direction of the Divine Blade of Salvation. Wait, Ling. Galji subconsciously felt a trace of uneasiness and wanted Ling to come back. After all, there was another possibility for the gift to drop apart from killing someone. For example, the original owner of the gift was not dead. Looks like that universe-like power is your trump card, Galji. Wu Ming's voice entered Galji's ears. In an instant, a black and purple teleportation door appeared. Wu Ming walked out from it and appeared beside the Divine Blade of Salvation. He held the Divine Blade of Salvation in his hand. Ha! Ling couldn't help but stop and look at Wu Ming blankly. Wasn't he killed by His Highness's another cosmology? Ling, come back! Galji snarled. Ling reacted instantly to Galji's roar, but the runes on the ground were still in effect. These runes weren't powerful Lune runes. Instead, they were runes that limited distances. They were often used around people who lived in seclusion to prevent outsiders from entering, and could only wander within a certain range. This was why Ling's gift of controlling distances was ineffective. If one moved within a set distance of a certain range, it might still be effective. But if one moved beyond this range, it was equivalent to being ineffective. This was why Ling's gift was as though ineffective. At that moment, Ling had no choice but to turn around and run toward Galji. But how could Wu Ming let her go? Along with the sound of chains, Ling felt a heavy blow to the back of her head. In an instant, she felt as though someone had struck her from behind with a stick and she gradually lost consciousness. Then, countless silver whitish chains like giant pythons bound Ling tightly. Even her nose and eyes were completely covered, making her look like a mummy. Then, Ling snapped her fingers and a purplish-black ripple appeared beneath her feet. She and the pseudo-heaven lock fell into it together. Ling. Galji took a step forward agitatedly, but due to his injuries, he couldn't help but kneel on the ground. Fortunately, Aurora was there to support him. Don't worry, I'm not that cruel to kill her. I only captured her. Wu Ming approached Galji step by step with the Blade of Salvation in his hand. Don't come over. Aurora raised her courage and roared at Wu Ming with her harp. However, this didn't have any effect on Wu Ming's advance. How about another deal? Wu Ming ignored Aurora and turned to Galji. Tell me your purpose in entering Salamandra and the sequence of events. Don't even think about it. Aurora wanted to attack again, but Galji grabbed her arm. Galji silently shook his head, indicating that Aurora shouldn't make any unnecessary resistance. Simply put, she should endure and not get hurt for no reason. At this time, the last Salamandra troops to arrive surrounded Galji, Wu Ming, and the others. Stop! Mandela shouted in high spirits. Then, he was glared at by Wu Ming. However, Mandela had to endure. Take these people down. Mandela pointed at Galji and the others. Then, the members of Salamandra stepped forward and prepared to take Galji and the others into custody. At this time, there was a violent tremor inside Salamandra. Rumble. The earth shook. Chapter 855. Galji looked at the epicenter and found that it was the fifth palace. That direction. Not good. Mandela's expression suddenly changed as he looked in the same direction. Quick! Inform everyone to evacuate the residents of Blazing Flame City. Get everyone to leave Blazing Flame City immediately. Move quickly. Mandela calmly gave the order. After that, the troops of Salamandra ignored Galji and Wu Ming and began to carry out Mandela's orders. After that, Mandela looked deeply at Wu Ming, Galji, and the others, and then rushed into Salamandra. As you can see, the seal of absolute evil has been broken. Seeing that the outsiders had left, Galji spoke. Galji noticed that Wu Ming's expression had also changed, but Wu Ming's expression was neither fear nor shock, but joy and melancholy. I think I know how you broke the seal of absolute evil, Galji. This was because Wu Ming felt the aura of his main body. It seemed that his main body was in Salamandra, which was why Wu Ming was so happy. Only Wu Ming's main body, the root dragon, was immune to the rules of the box court, and could break the seal of absolute evil without the tools to break the seal. Let's change the deal. Tell me all the information about absolute evil. Since the seal had been broken, it was time to collect information to deal with absolute evil. Wu Ming snapped his fingers. Pa! Along the way, a white contract document appeared in Galji's hand. Organizer authority? Seeing this contract document, Galji was shocked. He now knew why Wu Ming could capture Maxwell. It was because of the organizer authority. Then, Wu Ming took out the staff of Ain Zergong and tapped it lightly on the ground. Galji, Aurora, and Glea disappeared on the spot. They were forcibly sent to their own space by Wu Ming. Then, Wu Ming chanted the words of the spirit. My contract, my kin. I am the place where the tributaries converge. Bind with me, heed my call, obey my command, appear. Then, a figure appeared behind Wu Ming. It was Wu Ming's 8th incarnation, the kin. The Wu Ming that Galji had destroyed was actually one of Wu Ming's kin clones. Only the blade of salvation that the clone at that time was given by the main body. Then, Wu Ming handed the staff of Ain's Ergong to the clone. The clone nodded and tapped the ground with the tip of the staff. The clone also disappeared. He went to the intrinsic barrier to make a deal with Galji and the others, or rather, to act as the host of the game of gifts. However, the gift competition that Wu Ming forced Galji and the others to participate in was different from the one that he forced Maxwell to participate in. This time, Wu Ming prepared the gift competition for Galji, and the others only to fish for information. Wu Ming even cautiously divided the three of them into different spaces. Although it was a temporary imprisonment, Wu Ming was not prepared to let Galji and the others go so easily this time. At that moment, the members of Salamandra immediately acted as if they could not wait to leave this place immediately. Looking at Salamandra that was almost empty and had fallen into a sea of fire, Mandela could not help but sigh. There will be a day when Salamandra's headquarters will be covered in a sea of fire. After that, Mandela continued to walk inside. Sir Mandela? Mandela's confidants were puzzled by Mandela's behavior. If he continued to go deeper, he was afraid that he would not be able to come out later. The leader is still inside. I will go find her. Mandela said without turning his head. We will go together, Sir Mandela. Yes, Sir Mandela. Let's go together. Mandela's confidants immediately followed Mandela's footsteps. However, Mandela was furious. What are you doing? Can't you see that everyone who is touched by the black mud is burning? Retreat. Even the members of Salamandra who had the bloodline of the fire dragon could not hold on for more than a second. This showed how powerful the black mud was. However, one of Mandela's confidants immediately answered. But, Sir Mandela, we cannot abandon you, nor can we abandon Lady Shadora. The others did not speak, but their eyes were extremely serious. They looked like they would not leave no matter what Mandela said. It could only be said that they were indeed members of Salamandra, who had the bloodline of the fire dragon. Their stubbornness was exactly the same as Mandela, who also had the bloodline of the fire dragon. At this moment, Wu Ming flew in. Leave Shadora to me. Hurry up and evacuate the residents of Flame Capital. Don't let the black mud touch them. Otherwise it will be over. As Wu Ming spoke, he flew in from the back. He did not stop all the way and flew directly into the interior. Obviously, he did not give Mandela and the others a chance to choose. Then I will leave Shadora to you. Mandela was also a reasonable person. Since Wu Ming wanted to go in, he would be a burden if he followed him in. Everyone, follow me to evacuate the residents of Flame Capital. With that, Mandela left with his confidants. Wu Ming, on the other hand, went deep inside Salamandra. Looking at the black mud that kept spreading in front of him, what Wu Ming was worried about still happened. Chapter 856. If the black root mud was taken out on its own, it wouldn't cause much damage. It only had a special effect on Wu Ming. At most, it could destroy the seal of absolute evil like Galgi and the others. That was because the black root mud was attached to Wu Ming's body. If it was removed from Wu Ming's body, even if it was placed on the seal of absolute evil, it wouldn't cause any damage to the seal of absolute evil. The black root mud was neither good nor evil. It only targeted Wu Ming. However, if it was held by someone with evil intentions, it would completely become evil. Just like when Darius held the black root mud became an evil thing. It could erode servants, but other than that, it didn't have much effect on the ground, flowers, and trees. If Gidia held the black root mud, it would become a good thing because he only wanted to use the black root mud to achieve his own goals. Although it was evil in the eyes of humans, the black root mud was only used to deal with Wu Ming. There were no other changes. The black root mud was even simpler. It was neither good nor evil. It simply gave the black root mud to the Star Cup's consciousness. It didn't have much use at all, and it was easily destroyed by Wu Ming. Looking at the current situation, it was very likely that absolute evil had touched the black root mud and used the black root mud as its power to fuse with it. The amount of black root mud continued to increase, and it caught fire when it came into contact with people. It was likely that absolute evil's ability extended after fusing with the black root mud. If it's absolute evil that fused with the black root mud, I'm afraid it will come to me next. Wu Ming said to himself. Although he was talking to himself, it was reasonable. The black root mud and Wu Ming were natural enemies. After being held by others, the other party would have a strong hostility toward Wu Ming. Wu Ming had experienced this many times. Darius, the consciousness of the Star Cup, and Gidia were both good, evil, and neutral, but they all had one thing in common, which was that they were inexplicably hostile toward Wu Ming. As such, absolute evil, who had absorbed the black origin soil, was probably also hostile toward Wu Ming. However, even if he was attacked by absolute evil, Wu Ming wouldn't run away from it. In terms of emotions, absolute evil was an existence that could endanger Quan Ting. Since Wu Ming had encountered it, he would deal with it. Logically speaking, absolute evil had the black origin soil on him, and his main body was probably with absolute evil. Even if absolute evil didn't find trouble with Wu Ming would find trouble with absolute evil. Let's find Shadora first. Wu Ming activated his psychic power to search for Shadora. It could only be said that Wu Ming was very lucky to find Shadora's location in an instant. At this moment, Wu Ming sensed that Shadora was carrying a little girl from Salamandra. They were flying in a room filled with black mud and fire. The entire room was burning and couldn't come out. Shadora! Wu Ming shouted as he flew in Shadora's direction. Lord Villo! Shadora was overjoyed when she heard Wu Ming's voice, as if she had escaped. However, she immediately shouted at Wu Ming, Lord Wu Ming, be careful. Lord Varen, be careful of these flames. The flames produced by the black mud have the same properties as the black mud. Shadora knew that not long ago, one of her companions rushed into the flames to save someone because he had the fire dragon bloodline. In the end, not only did he not save the person, but he also died. Not even a trace of him was left. However, Wu Ming wasn't afraid of this. Or rather, only Wu Ming wasn't afraid of this. Whoosh! Wu Ming rushed into the sea of fire that surrounded Shadora and flew to her side. Lord Villo, are you all right? Shadora was startled. The black origin soil was indeed Wu Ming's natural enemy, but at the same time, Wu Ming was also the natural enemy of the black origin soil. Although the black origin soil countered Wu Ming and could deal a lot of damage to Wu Ming, it was the same. When the black origin soil was used by an outsider, Wu Ming was the only one who wasn't restricted. In other words, Wu Ming who could produce origin power had a resistance to the black origin soil. Don't worry about that for now. Leave with this child first, Wu Ming said and opened a portal. Lord Villo, please leave with us. This is the last child left in Salamandra. It was because of Shadora's continuous rescue that she couldn't escape in time. However, it was also thanks to Shadora that apart from Shadora and the little girl in her arms, there were no other living members in Salamandra. No, I still have to deal with the enemy this time. You guys leave first. Wu Ming clearly sensed a hostile aura approaching quickly from underground. However, in Shadora's opinion, Wu Ming chose to stay behind alone in order to cover the retreat of the people from the capital of glowing flames. Lord Villo, the seal of absolute evil under Salamandra, should have been broken. However, after analyzing the previous records, the Black Origin soil doesn't seem to be absolute evil's ability at all. Please be careful, Shadora kindly provided Wu Ming with information. I understand. You guys should leave first. Wu Ming pointed at the portal again and signaled Shadora to leave quickly. Of course, he knew what was going on. After all, they were of the same origin. Yes, okay. Lord Villo, I wish you victory, Shadora said and jumped into the portal. After confirming that Shadora and the little girl in her arms reached a safe location, Wu Ming closed the portal. Then, it's time to get down to business. Wu Ming said and raised the divine blade of salvation in his hand high up. Then, Wu Ming stopped moving. Then, a Lune rune appeared in front of Wu Ming out of thin air. He touched the Lune with his spirit power and a piece of information was transmitted into Wu Ming's mind. Information about absolute evil. However, before Wu Ming could think about it, the black mire below suddenly exploded. Wu Ming subconsciously slashed at the black mire below him. In an instant, the lightning of salvation that had been brewing on the divine blade of salvation suddenly exploded and hit a three-headed monster that had just jumped out of the ground. Roar! The monster let out an angry roar. It seemed that it was hurt by Wu Ming's attack. It really merged. The monster seemed to have been corroded by the black mire and lost its mind. Although the monster was covered in black mire, Wu Ming could vaguely see that its head was that of a dragon's. The information just now told Wu Ming about absolute evil, including what its true form was. The true form of absolute evil was not a special existence. It was just an evil god that stood at the peak of evil in the fire worship sect. Three-headed demon dragon, Azidakaha, Wu Ming slowly said the monster's name. The monster, or Azidakaha, responded to Wu Ming, but with an attack. Roar! The three-headed demon dragon roared and countless black mire gushed towards Wu Ming like pillars of magma. Boom! The house that Wu Ming was in, Salamandra, exploded. Wu Ming flew into the sky through the hole and looked down at Azidakaha with the divine blade of salvation raised high. Divine blade of salvation, release your brilliance. Chapter 857. Along with Wu Ming's words, the tip of the blade of salvation began to gather flames, and the flames slowly grew bigger. In the end, it turned into a sun, instantly illuminating the capital of glorious flames and even the entire outer gate of the 54545 division. Although the entire burning fiery capital was also filled with flames at night, at this moment, the light of the flames could only serve as a foil to the sun, produced by the holy sword that could even split a star. The people who were retreating from Raging Flame Capital couldn't help but slow down their footsteps when they saw this scene. However, Mandela frowned. This would greatly slow down their retreat, which was quite disadvantageous. Everyone! Lord Villo Silenseed, who defeated the Demon King who attacked during the Fire Dragon birth ceremony, is a good friend of Lord White Yiksha, and has strength no weaker than Lord White Yiksha, is fighting against the enemy who attacked us. We must seize the opportunity to retreat and not drag Lord Villo down. At that moment, Shadora, who appeared out of nowhere, shouted. When everyone heard this, it was as if they were awakened. They all sped up their retreat. After all, Wu Ming was covering for them. If they continued to stand there and watch, it would really be inexcusable. Although Shadora's voice could not reach the entire retreating team, many people who had begun to speed up their retreat would repeat Shadora's words when they saw someone slowing down. In this way, the news that the hero of no name was covering for their retreat spread wider and wider. More and more people sped up their retreat. In the end, before the black mud infected the entire fiery capital, everyone retreated. It could be said that Shadora's urging words had indirectly helped Wu Ming and No Name gain a wave of popularity. This made Mandela, who had finally found Shadora, feel rather helpless. Because this was completely using Salamandra as a stepping stone to help Wu Ming and No Name advertise. The people who covered the retreat of the residents of Fiery Capital were not the local Salamandra people, but the 7-digit number of No Name people from the outer gate. Although the enemy was too strong, this also reflected Wu Ming's strength. Simply put, Salamandra was at a disadvantage no matter what. Although Mandela did not fully understand the situation, in his opinion, Absolute Evil's release definitely had something to do with Wu Ming. The group of suspicious people at the entrance had obviously come from Salamandra. Since Wu Ming was able to stop the group of suspicious people at the entrance of Salamandra, if Wu Ming said that he was not aware of the situation, Mandela would not believe him at all. If Wu Ming had told Salamandra earlier, things would not have turned out this way. However, back then, Mandela did not tell Wu Ming what was sealed in Salamandra. It was his own doing. In short, although Mandela had some complaints about Wu Ming, he could only grit his teeth and swallow it. Moreover, Absolute Evil's seal had been unlocked and there were new changes. At present, he could only ask Wu Ming to temporarily stall Absolute Evil. However, if Wu Ming knew that Shadora was helping him advertise, he would not know whether to laugh or cry. Wu Ming did not know what AZ Dakaha was like in the past, but after fusing with the Black Mud, AZ Dakaha was originally living well in the source of the Black Mire underground. If Wu Ming had not come, AZ Dakaha would not have come out for a while. If he had to say something, it was Wu Ming who had prompted AZ Dakaha to come out of the underground ahead of time. Wu Ming was very clear about this. Therefore, if Wu Ming knew that Shadora had helped him and his community gain a wave of fame, he would probably be embarrassed for a while. However, Wu Ming was not likely to think about these things now. After all, the enemy was right in front of them. Wu Ming infused the countless magical powers in his body into the divine blade of salvation. The entire sun at the tip of the sword underwent an indescribable change. Of course, this was only in the eyes of outsiders. In the eyes of Wu Ming and AZ Dakaha, this sun was filled with lethality. It was especially so for AZ Dakaha. At this moment, he felt a threat to his life. Roar! The black monster spread its black dragon wings and scattered a large amount of black mud in an attempt to rush up to Wu Ming and gain the upper hand by striking first. However, Wu Ming naturally wouldn't give AZ Dakaha this opportunity. His arm that was holding the divine blade of salvation swung down abruptly and the sun at the tip of the sword struck straight at AZ Dakaha. In an instant, the two of them collided. Scorching flames and incomparably dazzling white light shrouded everyone's eyes. At this moment, Golden Flame City was brighter than during the day. Shortly after, the aftermath of the explosion erupted in the sky and swept in all directions. The scale of the heat wave was so huge that everyone who had retreated from Golden Flame City couldn't help but extend their arms to support their bodies to resist the heat wave. It's really like the sun. Mandela poked his head out. Although the sun in the sky had disappeared, the aftermath of the explosion was still emitting light and extreme heat. Golden Flame City was still as bright as day. Besides, Mandela was filled with all sorts of emotions after witnessing Wu Ming's strength once again. Wu Ming was still an existence that no one dared to look up to. However, unlike Mandela, the others were more concerned about whether the monster had been defeated by Wu Ming. Has it been defeated? It was unknown who said this. At this moment, before the aftermath of the explosion in the sky dissipated, a black figure fell from the sky. Everyone focused their gaze and realized that it was the black monster. The monster was defeated by the hero. However, before everyone could rejoice, they realized that the black mire on the ground had begun to extend toward the sky as if it was going to catch the monster. In fact, that was indeed the case. The black monster was caught by the high platform made of black mire. The monster stood firm and looked at the sky again, as if provoking the hero who had just shot it down. This was also a signal that the monster had not been defeated by the hero. It had only been shot down, and the danger was still there. Cover the evacuation of the residents immediately. Mandela, who saw this scene, immediately ordered the members of Salamandra. Mandela thought to himself, as expected, it's impossible for the opponent to be defeated by a non-human existence in the final trial. Golden Flame City was no longer safe, and the entire outer gate of 54,545 was no longer safe either. They had to evacuate from this outer gate as soon as possible. Yes. Some of the members of Salamandra seemed to have yet to react to the series of events just now. They were stunned for a while before agreeing. After Mandela's reminder, all the residents of Golden Flame City hurriedly took action. They were not fools. It was obvious that the monster could not be killed in a short time. Moreover, the black mire was still spreading, so they had to retreat to a safer place. Fortunately, because they had just experienced the Demon King's attack during the day, not all the residents of Golden Flame City returned to Golden Flame City. In addition, the people of Boxting were used to various disasters, so the following retreat was more orderly. If it were ordinary people in the outside world, the fire caused by the black mire would have burned everyone to ashes. Wu Ming, who was flying high in the sky, looked at the people around Golden Flame City gradually dispersing. He was inexplicably relieved. Chapter 858. Wu Ming could not understand what was going on in the minds of the residents of the box. In the face of such a disaster, they just stood around and watched? Why were they so calm? But at least they retreated in the end. With that in mind, Wu Ming looked down at Aziz Dakaha, who was staring at him like an abyss. In this way, Wu Ming could deal with this guy with peace of mind. According to the information provided by Galji, Aziz Dakaha, the absolute evil, was originally an evil god at the peak of evil in the Persian Zoroastrianism mythology. For some reason, he became the absolute evil in one of the final trials of humans in the box. Wu Ming was not afraid of Aziz Dakaha. After all, he was just an evil god. Wu Ming had never been afraid of gods. The half-god slayer authority he obtained in the God-Slayer world constantly reminded Wu Ming that Aziz was a god that needed to be killed. The reason why it was half-god slayer was because Wu Ming's previous deeds had been completed in the God-Slayer world, and he had obtained the half-god slayer qualification. Wu Ming had left his inheritance in Uruk, and he had killed the last king, Rama, and replaced him. It could be said that Wu Ming was a contradictory existence that was both a god-slayer and a god. However, Aziz Dakaha was not just an evil god in the Zoroastrianism. In this box, he had become one of the final trials of humans. And in the final trial of humans, he had to be defeated, surpassed, by humans. This was why Mandela wanted Wu Ming to temporarily stall Aziz Dakaha instead of defeating him. But that attack just now should have killed Aziz Dakaha, right? Yes, Wu Ming's blow just now did hit Aziz Dakaha, and Aziz Dakaha's breath at that time was also in a state of death. The Blade of Salvation was a so-called planet-destroying weapon. Even if Aziz Dakaha was an evil god, he would not be able to withstand the powerful blow of the Blade of Salvation in a head-on clash. That was why Wu Ming said that he had killed Aziz Dakaha. However, Wu Ming had subconsciously forgotten that this was the Box Garden world. The fire worship sect's three-headed demonic dragon, Aziz Dakaha, had indeed died. However, humans would never be killed by non-human beings in the final trial. Therefore, Quan Ting's system allowed Aziz Dakaha to come back to life. You can't kill me, my old enemy. At this moment, Aziz Dakaha spoke, but for some reason, all three of his heads spoke at the same time, speaking with emphasis to Wu Ming. You still have self-awareness. Wu Ming was shocked. After all, no matter who it was, they would think that the three-headed monster that was covered in black mud and whose original appearance could not be seen clearly and could only roar furiously had lost its mind. I am evil to begin with. How can I be controlled by this filth? Aziz Dakaha's three heads replied together in a mocking tone to Wu Ming. When the black mud came into contact with Aziz Dakaha, the black mud had already become evil, filth, under Aziz Dakaha's evil nature. Therefore, it was not wrong for Aziz Dakaha to call the black mud filth. Moreover, a monster should maintain the appearance of a monster. Have you ever seen a monster talk to another person? It was still a mocking tone, but it also explained why Aziz Dakaha had not spoken before. Aziz Dakaha had always followed the rules of Quan Ting. He was a monster that gave humans the final trial. How could a monster talk to a human? You keep saying that you are a monster, but you talk to me. Don't you find that very contradictory? Wu Ming asked in return. But you are also not a human, my kind. Ha ha ha. The three-headed dragon laughed loudly. The laughter of the three heads was indeed very penetrating. Even the retreating troops outside the city could hear the evil laughter. Aziz Dakaha was not wrong. He had already fused with the black mud and could be considered half of Wu Ming's kind. However, this did not mean that Wu Ming would reconcile with Aziz Dakaha. I do hope that you, the so-called one of my kind, can obediently return to your own seal. That's impossible. My kind. Aziz Dakaha's three heads stared at Wu Ming. If I don't kill you, I won't be able to take it. For example, humans had to eat and drink. As an existence that had fused with the black mud, Aziz Dakaha was hostile to Wu Ming due to the black mud. This caused Aziz Dakaha to half-willingly choose to eliminate Wu Ming. What's more, I still have the responsibility of giving the humans the final trial. If I don't destroy the humans, I will also feel terrible. Ha ha ha, Az-Dakaha's words were as casual as if he was talking about eating and drinking. Wu Ming could not understand the meaning behind Az-Dakaha's words. Then, Wu Ming pointed the divine blade of salvation at Az-Dakaha. Then, there is nothing to talk about between us. I will destroy you, just like those guys before. You will not be able to do it. If you want to know why, it is because... Az-Dakaha lowered his head, then suddenly raised it. I will destroy you here and now. After saying that, countless black mud turned into giant pillar-like tentacles that rushed into the sky like poisonous snakes that were about to prey on birds. Then you can try, Wu Ming said as he charged at Az-Dakaha. While dodging the tentacles, Wu Ming thought of a way to deal with Az-Dakaha. Az-Dakaha had just admitted that Wu Ming had indeed killed him, but there was no doubt that he had immediately revived. According to the information provided by Galji, according to the rules of the box court, in order to kill absolute evil, one had to destroy the other party's head, shoulders, and heart. It was said that the head and shoulders had been permanently damaged, so all one had to do was destroy absolute evil's heart. However, this method would not work on Wu Ming. It would be fine if it was just absolute evil, but the problem was that the other party had already fused with the black mud. The permanent damage to the head and shoulders could not be seen at all. Moreover, who knew if Az-Dakaha's original weakness had changed after fusing with the black mud? Even if it was still his weakness, Wu Ming did not think that absolute evil would die just because his head, shoulders, and heart were destroyed. Absolute evil's revival was a good example. Therefore, according to the rules of the box court world, I have to solve the human's final trial, absolute evil gift game to stop Az-Dakaha from reviving. Chapter 859. Wu Ming had his reasons for thinking this way. As the human's final trial, there must be a setting where only a human can completely kill the other party. In order to prevent Az-Dakaha from reviving, one must solve the riddle of the human's final trial, absolute evil. In the end, all the conditions were met, and one must possess enough strength to kill Az-Dakaha. Wu Ming's personal guess was that only by meeting all three of these conditions could absolute evil Az-Dakaha be completely killed. Wu Ming definitely had the strength. As for the wisdom to solve the bestowment game, Wu Ming believed that he could solve the riddle of absolute evil if given some time. However, he could not achieve the first condition of being a human no matter what. Even if his soul was extremely close to that of a human and he had a human name, Wu Ming was still an inhuman existence. He was the root dragon. Therefore, Wu Ming could not kill absolute evil by normal means. The reason why it was normal was because of the restrictions brought about by the root dragon's exempt box system. Although Wu Ming could participate in the bestowment game, the punishment for failing the bestowment game would not take effect on Wu Ming. Wu Ming, who had the identity of the root dragon, did not need to comply with these three conditions from the beginning. He could rely on his own strength to kill Az-Dakaha. However, Az-Dakaha had the root black mud. The root black mud might have brought unexpected benefits to Az-Dakaha. For example, it made Wu Ming unclear of Az-Dakaha's current abilities, intelligence, and weaknesses. However, as Wu Ming was the nemesis of the root black mud, the root black mud could be said to have given Wu Ming an advantage in dealing with Az-Dakaha. That was all there was to the nemesis. Wu Ming could completely ignore the series of conditions that he had deduced earlier and directly kill Az-Dakaha. Therefore, from the beginning, Wu Ming only needed to use the power of the root dragon to ignore all factors and achieve the conditions to directly kill Az-Dakaha. Of course, Wu Ming only thought of this now, but there was a blind spot at the moment. Whether this body can produce the power of origin is another matter. While dodging the black mud tentacles, Wu Ming could not help but frown. Although when he returned to the box, Wu Ming adjusted the spiritual base to the perfect standard for a servant, Wu Ming was still unsure whether it could produce the power of origin. As the clones of the heroic spirits, the attributes of the servant's interface were fixed. Wu Ming's spiritual base was the same. Although Wu Ming had broken this rule a few times, there was a reason for it. When he fought against Garna, the last noble phantasm that Wu Ming used was a temporarily modified noble phantasm. The reason why it could be like that was because at that time, Wu Ming's servant identity was Sodlek, which was a character that Wu Ming had fabricated in history, so he could change it however he wanted. Secondly, the world at that time was the native world of the inhibitors, and the inhibitors had a lot of power at that time, so they did not want the humans to be burned down. Because of these 2 points, Wu Ming's spiritual base could be arbitrarily modified on the spot at that time. Also, relying on the power of the Holy Grail to modify the spiritual base, Wu Ming changed from Saber Sodlek to Caster Yura Kyunryong. After all, the Holy Grail was a cheat, and Wu Ming himself was also a cheat, so it was not surprising that he could do this. Now, if Wu Ming wanted to modify the spiritual base on the spot, apart from being in the root, he had to rely on Wu Ming's own body, or his original body. The first time Wu Ming used the power of the root was when he faced Gidia. Although he could use it inexplicably, because Wu Ming's body had stayed in the root for a long time, his body had evolved, so Wu Ming, who often used his clones, was not very clear about it. However, it was the innate power of the root dragon, so it was reasonable for Wu Ming to master it. However, Wu Ming's experience of using the power of the root was only that one time. After all, since then, Wu Ming's body fell into the box garden world and disappeared. Now that he didn't have the Holy Grail, nor did he have any restraining power, and his main body was nowhere to be seen, Wu Ming had no way to change his current spirit base. Wu Ming clearly sensed the aura of his original body just now, but he couldn't sense it now. If Wu Ming didn't look for Shad aura, he might be able to find his original body. But if he didn't look for Shad aura, perhaps no, it should be certain that something would happen to Shad aura today. However, Wu Ming didn't regret it. Although he hated Mandela, he didn't hate Shad aura. This little girl who worked hard for the community made him realize that Shad aura was worth Wu Ming saving. Anyway, even if Wu Ming didn't save Shad aura and directly went to the location of his original body, Wu Ming might not be able to find his original body. After all, Az Dakaha was there. I'm afraid that my original body was covered by the black mud again. If there was anything that Wu Ming could think of that could conceal his original body's aura, it would be the black mud. Or perhaps, my original body is now in Az Dakaha's body. While pondering, Wu Ming avoided the black mud tentacles and arrived before Az Dakaha. Roar! Az Dakaha wasn't afraid of Wu Ming. He stood up in his human form and coalesced a huge blade from the black mud, slashing it at Wu Ming. Bzzz. Wu Ming raised his divine blade of salvation to meet the attack. Countless lightning of salvation attached to the divine blade of salvation exploded. In an instant, Az Dakaha, who had already stabilized his body, pointed at Wu Ming. Countless black mud tentacles flew around Wu Ming and wrapped Wu Ming into a sphere that kept compressing. At this moment, a thunderous sound came from the sphere formed by the black mud tentacles wrapped around Wu Ming. Boom! Then, the black mud sphere slowly disintegrated, revealing Wu Ming in the center of the sphere, unharmed. Wu Ming's spirit base couldn't produce origin power on its own, but as an entity that had fused with Wu Ming's main body, the divine blade of salvation had also been strengthened to a certain extent during the Great Origin. While it couldn't completely suppress the black origin soil, it was still tainted with a bit of origin power. Combined with the divine blade of salvation's extraordinary nature, the divine blade of salvation should be able to deal with a certain amount of black origin soil. It should be noted that the divine saber of salvation could easily kill Az Dakaha with a single strike. The best example was the divine saber of salvation's ability to kill Az Dakaha with a single strike. But that wasn't enough. Just relying on the divine blade of salvation was not enough to kill the final trial's absolute evil, Az Dakaha. After all, a quantitative change would lead to a qualitative change. Az Dakaha had now become a vessel for secreting the black mud. Just relying on the divine blade of salvation was not enough. You're still somewhat capable, aren't you? Az Dakaha said as a pair of black shadow-like wings appeared on his back. Then, the black mud on Az Dakaha's body spread over his wings. His shadow wings became tainted wings filled with black mud. Then, let's continue. Let's continue our fight. Chapter 860. Shad aura flew in the sky above the 54545 outer gate and looked at the 54545 outer gate with a worried expression. She couldn't sense what was going on inside the gate. A day had passed. At this moment, the entire 54545 outer gate was completely covered by the black mud. However, the people of the 54545 Outer Gate and their communities had all evacuated from the 54545 Outer Gate because of Wu Ming's cover. After all, there was no effective way to stop the black mud from spreading. Everyone in the 54545 Outer Gate could only retreat. In the end, they relied on the boundary wall of the Outer Gate to stop the black mud from spreading. However, the boundary wall couldn't be used anymore. Not only that, but many places, or rather, the buildings of the entire 54545 Outer Gate had changed. The black mud seemed to have made a lot of irregular changes in the shape of the original buildings. Not only did it make the 54545 Outer Gate unrecognizable, but it also blocked the sky of the entire 54545 Outer Gate like a lush black forest. Moreover, the second change of the black mud also connected, making the 54545 Outer Gate look like a huge mountain with a lot of holes. One thing was certain. The entire 54545 Outer Gate had completely turned into Aziz Dakaha's black mud territory. Moreover, it seemed that the black mud had the ability to block detection. The people of the 54545 Outer Gate couldn't find out what was going on inside, including whether Wu Ming was alive or dead. There was no movement inside at all. However, the people of the box court couldn't just sit there and wait for death. The members of Salamandra who had retreated from the 54545 Outer Gate had already united a large number of communities in the surrounding outer gates to form a battle line around the 54545 Outer Gate. The purpose was to prevent the black mud from spreading. Although the black mud wasn't spreading now, who knew when the black mud would break through the boundary wall and start spreading? It wasn't too late to mend the pen after the sheep were lost, right? The reason why the other communities were so obedient was because Shadora had revealed that the enemy who attacked Glowing Flame Capital and the entire 54545 Outer Gate was absolutely evil. Moreover, the leader of this alliance was the strongest demon in the North District, Vera Za Ignifast, which was why they were willing to compromise. Moreover, there was nothing they could do even if they did not compromise. If the enemy was absolutely evil, they would definitely die if they did not unite. This was without a doubt. If they were united, there was still hope for survival. Shadora, so you're here, Mandela said in a heavy tone as he flew to Shadora's side. Big brother, will Master Villo be all right? Shadora looked at Mandela worriedly. Seeing his sister's expression, Mandela turned his head to the side. You're the ruler of the hierarchy. Don't always show such an expression. Whether Wu Ming was fine or not, they had to do their best to survive and think of a way to deal with AZ Dakaha. This was a matter of life and death. Although Mandela didn't answer Shadora directly, she understood what he meant. After all, they were siblings. It's hard to believe. If even Master Villo can't deal with the enemy, can we really deal with it? Shadora said as she looked at the changed outer gate of 54,545 Outer Gate. And our house. It changed completely in just a day. However, even if it didn't change, it would probably be destroyed by absolute evil. I've already sent out a distress signal to the other classes and reported this to the higher-ups of the box court. If nothing goes wrong, the Sky Army should be here soon. The so-called Sky Army was a special force formed by the upper echelons of the box court to suppress the humans in the final trial. Although not everyone knew about the existence of the Sky Army, Shadora naturally knew about it as the leader of the upper echelons. And Mandela was Shadora's assistant, so he knew about the existence of the Sky Army. Master White Yaksha just replied to me. She said she'll rush over from the East District soon. Don't worry, Mandela comforted Shadora. And Villo isn't weak. I think even if he can't kill absolute evil, he won't be killed by absolute evil. That's true. Shadora sighed and flew to the ground. Seeing Shadora leave, Mandela couldn't help but sigh. Of course Mandela, who didn't know Wu Ming very well, said this to comfort Shadora. As one of the oldest Godslayers, absolute evil wasn't even afraid of a 2-digit number. Even if Wu Ming was stronger than a 3-digit number, in Mandela's opinion, it was unlikely that he would survive after fighting absolute evil alone for a day. Absolute evil didn't move at the moment. Perhaps it was resting and recovering from the injuries caused by the battle with Wu Ming, or perhaps it wasn't injured at all and just didn't want to come out for the time being. Either way, they had to be prepared. However, Mandela could only comfort Shadora like this. Shadora had probably already seen through Mandela's intentions, but she could only think so. This was because only by making everyone think that Wu Ming was still inside, delaying AZ Dakaha, could they create a winnable atmosphere. Otherwise, they might not be able to set up a defensive line around the outer gate of the 54545 division. Facing an enemy who did not put up a defense but ran away blindly, that would only lead to a faster death. I hope the Sky Army can come as soon as possible. If they only relied on Vera and the upcoming White Wuxia to deal with absolute evil, who had undergone an unknown transformation, they would probably be doomed. They could only rely on the Sky Army in the upper echelons of the temple. Then, Mandela rode the fire dragon and flew down. At this moment, the intense battle was still ongoing in Az Dakaha's Black Mud territory. Chapter 861. During the day of constant fighting between Wuming and Az Dakaha, as if excessive destruction would usher in new life, Wuming destroyed a large amount of black mud, but at the same time, a large amount of black mud was produced, causing the black mud to spread faster. It was said that it covered the entire outer gate of 54,545 in a day, but in fact, it was only because the people outside the outer gate of 54,545 discovered that the black mud had spread to the boundary wall a day later. Moreover, the black mud did not stop spreading because of the boundary wall, but only because of Az Dakaha's order to trap Wuming. The boundary wall just happened to be a dividing line. During this period, Wuming did not care about how the black mud eroded the outer gate of 54,545. After all, those who should be evacuated had already evacuated. At the same time, Wuming did not care about how the black mud gradually trapped him. Wuming just kept fighting with Az Dakaha. And Az Dakaha also gave him face. He turned the entire outer gate of 54,545 into his own devil's den, not only to besiege Wuming, but also to prevent others from disturbing the fight between Az Dakaha and Wuming. Not only did he satisfy Wuming's desire to fight with Az Dakaha, but he also prevented outsiders from interfering. As for why, it was because it was related to Wuming's plan. Although it seemed that Wuming was now trapped in this devil's den full of black mud, in fact, Wuming was indeed trapped. Whether it was entering the inherent barrier or leaving through the teleportation gate, they were all stopped by Az Dakaha's magic. It had to be known that Az Dakaha was rumored to have mastered over 1,000 types of magic. Although the final trial was absolutely evil, Az Dakaha was still Az Dakaha. He could still use over 1,000 types of magic. The boundary and portal were theoretically just the use of space. As long as magic was used properly, it could naturally be blocked. However, Wuming did not panic at all. After all, he did not want to leave just like that. Az Dakaha was hostile to Wuming. This was true. In the continuous confrontation with Az Dakaha, Wuming became more and more certain of this. Usually, people who had the black mud would become Wuming's enemy or treat Wuming as an enemy. However, Az Dakaha was really serious this time. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was an obsession. As the final trial of humans, Az Dakaha was obsessed with eliminating Wuming first instead of fulfilling his duties as the final trial of humans. This in itself was very abnormal. The rules of the box could not be violated by anyone other than Wuming. Although there were some people who took advantage of loopholes, they could only take advantage of small and harmless loopholes. It was simply impossible to take advantage of the box's loopholes. The humans' final trial was the same. Az Dakaha, who had been released from the seal, didn't give the humans a trial. Instead, he was competing with Wuming here. This was something that was impossible to happen. It was not a problem to fight back against an enemy, but Az Dakaha clearly wanted to fight to the death with Wuming before doing anything else. Perhaps because of the purity of the black mud, Az Dakaha's enmity towards Wuming had risen to the level of obsession. The power of the black mud had even placed Az Dakaha's duties as the final trial of humans behind his obsession with Wuming. Therefore, as long as Wuming was still around, Az Dakaha would not take on the duties of the final trial of humans. Simply put, Wuming had a taunt on him that Az Dakaha did not notice at all. Although Wuming did not want to taunt Az Dakaha at first, he felt that this would restrain Az Dakaha and prevent him from harming the outside world. In addition, Wuming had his own ideas. Therefore, he and Az Dakaha fought in the Devil's Den for an entire day, or rather, an entire night. Az Dakaha was released at night. Now, although Wuming could not see the weather outside, based on Wuming's sense of time, it was almost night time. After a day of fighting, Wu Ming more or less understood what he needed to understand. Do you still have time to be distracted? The 3-meter-tall Azidakaha took advantage of Wu Ming's momentary distraction to rush in front of Wu Ming. A huge dragon claw covered in black mud viciously pressed down on Wu Ming's face. Isn't that a given? After all, even if I'm distracted, you can't do anything to me. Ever since he started fighting with Azidakaha, Wu Ming's psychic energy had been released from his body. As long as anything came within 100 meters of him, Wu Ming could instantly sense it and react. Relying on the power of the Sun and Phoenix of the 12 avatars, this was why Wu Ming could deal with Azidakaha for a day. Using Giant to wrestle in close combat, using Vitality to recover himself from time to time, and whenever he was surrounded by black mud, he would use Sun to burn it, and then use Phoenix to move. Simply put, it felt like Wu Ming was playing with Azidakaha all this time. No, it couldn't be said that because... Lightning! 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 I am the conqueror who can defeat 1,000 with white, 10,000 with 1,000, and 10,000 with 10,000. Now, for me who stands on the side of justice, please shine brightly and bestow upon me divine power. I am the one who will crush all enemies and enmity from humans and demons. Wu Ming, who was facing Azidakaha's palm, quickly chanted the power of Thunder God. Wu Ming himself turned into lightning and quickly distanced himself from Azidakaha. At the same time, he also used lightning to injure Azidakaha, causing an extremely temporary paralysis effect on Azidakaha. Turning off the Thunder God avatar, Wu Ming's figure appeared, but the hand that Wu Ming used to fight with Azidakaha was pitch black as if it was poisoned. However, as if he had already adapted to this, Wu Ming didn't panic at all. Then, Wu Ming chanted the power of divine power again. A person with the supreme divine power of protection. The gods protect him, the demons hate him, and no enemy can get close to him. He is like a fountain of vitality that surges endlessly, granting the world equal protection. After he finished chanting, Wu Ming's arm returned to normal. Chapter 862. Sure enough, it's not only the blade of salvation that has the aura of origin, but so does my authority. In fact, Wu Ming had long discovered that his authority had a weak restraining effect on Azidakaha, or rather, the black mud on Azidakaha's body. After all, the 12 avatars were the same as the blade of salvation. They were existences that had been baptized together with Wu Ming in the origin, so they naturally carried the aura of origin. In other words, his authority also had the ability to restrain Azidakaha, although it was very weak. Similarly, the vitality also had a certain recovery effect on the corrosive damage caused by the black mud, so Wu Ming, who previously did not dare to fight Azidakaha in close combat, dared to do so now. However, because the recovery effect was not very optimistic, Wu Ming could not excessively come into close contact with Azidakaha for too long. If he came into contact with him too much, the vitality avatar would lose its effectiveness. However, this power alone was far from enough. Whether it was the blade of salvation or the 12 avatars, they contained too little power of origin. Even if Azidakaha was killed in an instant, Azidakaha would be healed by the black mud. In addition, this place had now become Azidakaha's black mud cave. If he did not clean up all the black mud, Azidakaha's injuries caused by origin would completely disappear as soon as he came into contact with the black mud. No, perhaps even injuries not caused by origin would be healed by Azidakaha. For example, right now. Although Azidakaha had injured Wu Ming in the previous exchange of blows, he had also been injured by a trace of origin power in Wu Ming's Thunder God avatar. However, a black mud tentacle approached Azidakaha and gently touched him. Azidakaha's injuries were immediately healed, and it was impossible to tell that he was injured at all. From this, it could be seen that Wu Ming was still unable to completely destroy Azidakaha. Without power, you can't do anything to me. You can only be a lowly mouse in my cage, being toyed with by me. Ha ha ha. It was as if he was quite satisfied with Wu Ming's helpless look, but his laughter only added to the despair. Wu Ming wasn't a human. Wu Ming wasn't human. After adjusting his breathing, Wu Ming began to ponder. According to Azidakaha, it seemed like he had never used his full strength and was only playing with Wu Ming. Wu Ming did not think that Azidakaha was bluffing. Aziz Dakaha had once fought against millions of gods and was not at a disadvantage.
Although there were only 3 digits of him, he was no weaker than the 2 digits of humans in the final trial.
Just the god spirit level body created from his blood alone was enough to make him suffer. By the way, this information was obtained from Galji by Wu Ming's clone. This information was mixed in with the Lune runes from before. Perhaps it was because Aziz Dakaha was covered in black mud, but Wu Ming had never seen Aziz Dakaha use the blood clone technique. However, this technique should be considered passive and could not be used actively. Moreover, Aziz Dakaha's blood had probably been assimilated into the black mud. Did that mean this technique could not be used? Wu Ming was overthinking things. Since the blood had been assimilated by the black mud, didn't that mean the black mud was Aziz Dakaha's blood? Roar! Suddenly, Aziz Dakaha roared. Under Wu Ming's solemn expression, blurry things appeared from the black mud. There was no doubt that these were Aziz Dakaha's clones. Roar, roar, roar.
These indistinguishable black clones roared in unison, and then rushed in Wu Ming's direction, or it could be said that they were carried by the black mud and flew over.
It seemed that Aziz Dakaha was not prepared to continue playing with Wu Ming. Coincidentally, Wu Ming had the same thought.
God says humans are sinful.
God says humans need to be purified.
Thus, I bestow the flood upon my body. In the name of the Supreme King, I will grant the people of the world equal relief.
Wu Ming slowly chanted the spirit of words until the Aziz Dakaha clone at the front was extremely close to Wu Ming. The spirit of words had just finished chanting. In an instant, an ocean-like wave surged out of nowhere from Wu Ming's back, washing away all of Aziz Dakaha's doppelgangers and a large amount of black mud. In an instant, the flood erupted. The flood that submerged the entire outer gate of 54,545 caused Aziz Dakaha to raise his height. He was clearly surprised by Wu Ming's move. Without stopping, Wu Ming extended his left hand and continued to chant other spirit of words. Thou hast violated the contract and brought sin to the world. Lord's Day, sinners shall be punished. Crush their backs, dig out their bones, hair and brains, and trample on their blood and mud. If I am the one who cannot approach the darkness, I will follow the words of the Lord and destroy thee. The flood changed color and turned black. At the same time, the flood also changed in nature. The black mud was being eroded by the flood that was mixed with twice the original power. It was quite shocking. But just the combination of the flood and annihilation avatars was not enough to have a serious effect on the black mud. And because of the mutual restraint, the black mud was also slowly devouring the black flood that submerged the outer gate of 54,545. I didn't expect you to have such a trump card. Aziz Dakaha praised Wu Ming. Whether it was the flood or annihilation avatars, Aziz Dakaha didn't know about them. Or rather, Wu Ming deliberately didn't use them in order to catch him off guard.
But this alone isn't enough.
Aziz Dakaha seemed to be mocking Wu Ming.
The shadow wings on his back suddenly spread out, and a large amount of black mud seemed to be recreated.
It swarmed out from Aziz Dakaha's back and increased the amount of black mud. It also accelerated the rate at which the black mud was eroding the Black Sea. But what surprised Aziz Dakaha even more was what came next. Lightning! 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 I am the conqueror who can defeat 1,000 with white, 10,000 with 1,000, and 10,000 with 10,000. Now, for me who stands on the side of justice, please shine brightly and bestow me with divine power. Reaching out his right hand, Wu Ming chanted a new incantation. Countless thunderbolts mixed into the black flood. The black flood with thunderbolts was temporarily on par with the replenished black mud. At this moment, Wu Ming's 2 outstretched hands suddenly clasped together. I am the one who will crush all enemies and enmity between humans and demons. Suddenly, Wu Ming adjusted the Thunder God avatar to the maximum output. Suddenly, the area contained by the Black Sea, or rather, the entire outer door of the 54545 division, was filled with thunderbolts. The Black Sea instantly became a sea of thunderbolts. However, the large amount of thunderbolts didn't spread to the surroundings. Instead, they evaporated the entire Black Sea. The entire Black Sea was disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Is his brain damaged? Or is it that he didn't control his moves well? Aziz Dakaha mocked Wu Ming's play of his own attack cancelling out his own attack. But then, Aziz Dakaha realized that something was wrong, because his entire black mud den was covered in fog. Chapter 863. What are you trying to do? Az Dakaha couldn't help but shout. The black ocean that had been evaporated by the thunder god's incarnation had now turned into mist and filled the entire black mud cave. Moreover, from the outside, billowing white fog could be seen emerging from the numerous holes in the black mud cave, as if the interior was on fire. The thick fog had indeed attracted the attention of outsiders. "What's that?" someone shouted. Some people noticed the mist that was coming out of the cave.
Gradually, the large number of community members surrounding the 54545 barrier put down their work one by one and looked at the devil's den that was emitting thick fog.
Many brave people flew into the sky, hoping to observe from a closer distance. Smoke? No, it's mist. Mandela rode a flying dragon into the sky. It would be easier to investigate the mist.
After checking the defensive grace that he had prepared, Mandela piloted the wyvern in the direction of the fog to begin his investigation.
In the sky not far away, White Yuksha was flying toward them.
Because they knew the seriousness of the matter, the outer gates around the 54545 outer gate had been controlled by the North District's hierarchy and sealed off.
As a result, White Yuksha could only move to the nearest outer gate that was sealed off and use his own methods to come over. White Yuksha, who had no convenient method, could only fly over. This power. The thick fog also attracted White Yuksha, who had just rushed over. This caused White Yuksha, who was about to land, to give up on his plan. Instead, he headed straight for the Devil's Den. Wuming had used flood in front of White Yuksha. The mist was very similar to Wuming's flood. Or rather, it had the exact same aura. How could it not attract White Yuksha's attention? In the temporary meeting room of the 54545 Outer Gate Alliance, Shadora, who was alone with Vera to discuss the situation, also ran out because of the mist. Vera was the same.
"Villo," Vera muttered softly.
She jumped and flew up as well. Wait a minute, Master Vera." Shadora immediately followed after seeing this. Just as Shadora and Vera flew into the sky, the White Yuksha, who happened to encounter them, issued a warning. "Don't get too close. I'm afraid the mist is corrosive." White Yuksha had witnessed the might of the outer sex sea of annihilation. Absolute Evil's clone had died without a trace. This fog probably had a similar ability. "Lord White Yuksha, have you arrived?" Shadora was rather surprised to see White Yuksha here. "I just arrived not long ago. When I saw the changes here, I immediately rushed over." White Yuksha nodded at Shadora and Vera. "We rushed over because we saw the changes here," Shadora replied. Then, Shadora looked at the temporary base of the community. Taking a closer look, these communities seemed to be very close to the boundary wall. If the corrosive mist were to spread, it would be terrible. Shadora asked, "Lord White Yuksha, do we need to inform the surrounding communities to retreat?" Although she was in the same class as White Yuksha, compared to White Yuksha, there was nothing wrong with Shadora asking White Yuksha whether it was strength or experience. However, Vera answered Shadora instead of White Yuksha. "This is a gift from the Villo. It has the aura of a Villo." Vera meant that there was no need to retreat. Not only that, but Vera also gave White Yuksha the urge to rush in. "Don't act rashly, Vera." Seeing that Vera had such an impulse, White Yuksha said to Vera. Then, White Yuksha turned to Shadora. "Let's get the others to retreat first. After all, I don't know what's going on inside." "Okay, Lord White Yuksha. I'll inform everyone now."
But at this moment, a figure fell from the sky.
"That's Big Brother Mandela?" Shadora was shocked. Why did Mandela fall from the sky all of a sudden? Could it be that he was in danger? Although they didn't know what happened to Mandela, White Yuksha and the others wouldn't watch Mandela fall just like that. Swish! Suddenly, White Yuksha shot out at the speed of a rocket, easily rescuing the fallen Mandela and the wyvern carrying Mandela. Vera and Shadora also flew over one after the other. "Big Brother Mandela!" Shadora yelled and flew to White Yuksha's side. White Yuksha held the unconscious wyvern in one hand and the unconscious Mandela in the other. His expression was rather solemn. No matter if it was the wyvern or Mandela's body, or rather, their skin was filled with burn marks. They must have been accidentally corroded by the spreading mist during the investigation. But don't worry, it's just a severe burn on the skin, White Yiksha said and handed the wyvern and Mandela to Shadora. Perhaps a severe burn on the skin outside the box was a serious injury, but it was only a minor injury inside the box. Moreover, Mandela was a subspecies of the fire dragon and had a certain resistance to fire damage, so Mandela wasn't seriously injured. Shadora, after bringing Mandela back, immediately informed the surrounding communities to retreat by 10 kilometers and pay attention to any changes here. If there's no other way, retreat further. Yes, Sir White Yiksha. Shadora, who was concerned about her brother, nodded immediately and flew down with Mandela and the wyvern. Then, White Yiksha looked at the mist released by the demon's den and said to Vera, "It can even burn a subspecies of the fire dragon, and it looks like the aftermath." "This mist isn't simple," White Yiksha said. Although she knew that Wuming was powerful, Wuming always brought her new surprises. "The villa is in danger," Vera said and was about to barge in again. "Is this really okay?" Perhaps because there were no outsiders, White Yiksha's rather strange words entered Vera's ears. "Although the villa isn't safe, it isn't dangerous either. I know that guy better than thou." No matter what, White Yiksha had the advantage over Vera in terms of time and understanding. That guy isn't someone who can be defeated easily, even if the opponent is absolute evil. Otherwise, Wuming wouldn't have been able to create such a huge commotion after fighting with Az Dakaha for a day. Although that was the case, it wasn't a reason to stop Vera. Knowing this, White Yiksha immediately flew in front of Vera and spoke again. "Who knows, it might be a crucial moment now. If thou barge in, it might ruin the Villo's plan." Ugh! Vera was instantly embarrassed. It had to be said that this was exactly what Vera wanted. Indeed, after all, Wuming and Az Dakaha had been fighting inside for a day. What if it was a crucial moment now and Vera suddenly barged in and disrupted it? It's better for us to stay on the periphery and observe the situation. However, at this moment, a heatwave that distorted space shot out from a corner of the demon's den and crashed into the boundary wall, causing a shocking explosion. Chapter 864. The timeline jumped forward a few minutes. The fog created by Wuming's Thunder God avatar had yet to spread outside. A large amount of fog was concentrated in the Devil's Den, which was not very permeable, and would not dissipate in a short time. First, the fog corroded the interior of the Devil's Den, and the interior of the Devil's Den was completely filled with black mud. Hiss! When the fog came into contact with the black mud, there was the sound of something being corroded. The corroded black mud had no choice but to passively endure it because the fog was too small. Unless the black mud filled the entire Devil's Den, it would not be able to do anything. "What is this?" Az Dakaha recognized the nature of the mist. Az Dakaha was surprised to see the true nature of the fog. It was a black sea of gas molecules, and these molecules carried the power of flood and annihilation. It was this power that was constantly corroding the black mud. However, as these gas molecules corroded the black mud, the fog molecules themselves were also dying. After all, the black mud also had the ability to corrode. When the gas molecules corroded the black mud, they would also be corroded by the black mud. It could be said that even if the black mud could only passively endure it, it would not suffer much. However, these gas molecules were originally sacrificial pawns. Their purpose was to provide cover for Wuming, so it did not matter if they were used up. Since it was to provide cover, Wuming naturally had plans to do something. As an existence with a similar mind, Az Dakaha would not just wait for Wuming to continue. Don't even think about it. No matter what Wuming wanted to do, Az Dakaha would not let Wuming have his way. As he spoke, Az Dakaha opened his mouth. The inside of his mouth was also covered in black mud. It was so dark that no one could tell what it originally looked like. Only his black fangs were as sharp as ever. In this pitch-black mouth, flashes of flame suddenly appeared between the fangs and moved restlessly. In an instant, Wuming, who was hidden in the fog, could clearly feel that the world had begun to shake. Legend had it that the three-headed mystic dragon was a human king who was guided by the evil god of the sect of fire, Angola Manuel. Before he was defeated, He had destroyed a third of the world. This inheritance that destroyed a third of the world became Aziz Dakaha's gift in the box court world. It was also known as the strongest gift of the Lightning series, the Kvarina of the Hegemon's halo. At this moment, the radiance of the Kvarina that Az Dakaha spoke of gradually solidified. During this process, a trace of black aura climbed onto the radiance and dyed the Kvarina black. Without a doubt, it was the source of black mud. No matter what you want to do, I will kill you before you complete it. Az Dakaha was prepared to use the Kvarina mixed with the source of black mud to completely eliminate Wuming. With that, Az Dakaha spat out the Kvarina, which had been strengthened by the black origin soil, towards the ground. An ominous wave of extreme heat shot out from Az Dakaha's mouth. It was a heat that could melt steel in an instant. Then, an extremely strange scene occurred. A heat ray more than 10 meters in diameter shot out from the 3-meter-tall Az Dakaha's mouth. Under Az Dakaha's control, it shot straight towards Wuming's position, or rather, the position before the fog covered Wuming's figure. The fog that came into contact with the heat ray disappeared in an instant, and the fog near the heat ray evaporated completely. In the end, the heat ray hit Wuming's position and caused a violent explosion. Not only that, but the Kvarina continued to be released. In the end, the black mud cave was penetrated, and the Kvarina was spat out by Az Dakaha. But at this moment, Wuming's voice entered Az Dakaha's ears. Az Dakaha was sure that Wuming was behind him. In other words, Wuming had dodged Az Dakaha's prize technique. Perhaps it was the interference of the corrosive fog that caused Az Dakaha's perception to drop for a moment, so he didn't notice Wuming's movement. As for Wuming, he had already started chanting the words of the Phoenix incarnation when the fog had covered his body. He arrived behind Az Dakaha. However, before Az Dakaha could get angry, a feeling of surprise rushed to his mind. For victory, quickly come before me. Undying sun, please bestow upon me a shining steed. The demonic whisper entered Az Dakaha's ears, and at the same time, Az Dakaha could feel a wave of heat spreading from his back. Immediately after, another sentence of strengthened words came out. Spirited steed, I, the lifeblood of the dragon of origin, bestow the eternal glory. Bring me the shining wheel that symbolizes me. The heat was mixed with the aura of a large amount of origin power. It was certain that Wuming was behind Az Dakaha, and he was very close. But soon after, Az Dakaha had doubts. He couldn't possibly have so much origin power, right? But what was certain was that if Az Dakaha was hit by this move, there was a high possibility that he would be killed, ignoring the rules of the box court. It was a huge crisis. But Az Dakaha wouldn't just sit there and wait for death. If Silent Wonder's attack hit Aziz Dakaha, then Aziz Dakaha might be able to insta-kill him. However, at such a close distance, if Silent Wonder was hit by Kvarina's wheel of hegemony, the Kvarina in his mouth, which had yet to be completely extinguished, once again ignited with a black light. Aziz Dakaha abruptly turned his body and shot it out. A heat ray that was several meters long instantly covered everything in front of Az Dakaha. Although the Kvarina's power and range weren't as strong as before because it wasn't charged, Az Dakaha didn't think that Wuming could withstand this attack. Where are you attacking, Az Dakaha? Wuming's figure appeared as he spoke. And Wuming's current position was right next to the heat ray that hadn't ended yet. Az Dakaha was right. Wuming couldn't withstand the Kvarina mixed with black mud, but if Az Dakaha couldn't hit Wuming, it would be a different matter. It could be said that if Az Dakaha had released the Kvarina, Wuming would have died without a doubt. But Az Dakaha had missed. How is this possible? Az Dakaha's pitch-black pupils dilated a little. Clearly, he didn't believe that he had made a mistake. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.